Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, welcome into the program today. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and you are ready for the program. Today on the show, we have the one, the only, Mr. Ralph Bond. He is, of course, our science and technology trends correspondent. And yeah, he's going to be covering 4 different stories as we do every week. And of course, he does that over on the Mark Mason Show as well. But on our show, we get really in depth and Ralph really gets into the nitty gritty of these stories, but there's always something more, which leads me to computeramerica.com. ComputerAmerica.com is our website for everything, past shows, future shows, show notes, contests, giveaways, articles, podcasts, everything, ladies and gentlemen, that we do. You can, of course, find it over at ComputerAmerica.com. And the show notes in particular, well, Ralph spends a lot of time putting those together, sourcing them, titling them, and, of course, giving you everything that we are going to be, talking about. But it's his bullet points, and if you want more, hey, the sources are right there. So go ahead and check that out. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, check out our website. I hope that you're having a good week and ready for the weekend. Let's go ahead and bring him on and, learn more about what we do here on the program. So once again, Ralph Bond, science and technology trends correspondent and longtime Computer America contributor. Ralph, how you doing? Welcome back onto the program.
I'm doing great, and if you're ready to end your week with uplifting and positive news from the science and technology community, you've come to the right place. And 2 of our stories, in fact, have a Northwest-based reality or where they come from, because I'm in the Portland, Oregon area, so I was kind of delighted to see 2 of the stories in our area. And for first-time people coming on with the show, let me give you a little background of what
Sure.
I do each week. I'm an aggregator of science and tech news features. I don't write these things. This is not original research. I just monitor, track things, and distill stuff down into the essential points that Ben and I then can share with you, and along with the show notes that Ben was talking about. And I look for important stories that don't usually capture mainstream press attention. And sometimes they're kind of weird and quirky, and sometimes almost like sci-fi. And sometimes you say, this can't be real, but it is. I'm always on the lookout for news that gives a glimpse into where we're headed in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, all across the board. And what I do, as we alluded to a moment ago, we take each news item, we kind of crunch it down to the essential points, try to put it in a very user-friendly and digestible form. And I stress to the audience, as Ben said himself, please come out to computeramerica.com, get today's show notes if you want to dive deeper, because we'll have the links, images, links to videos where they're available and that sort of thing. And you can dive as deep as you want.
Absolutely. So, and ladies and gentlemen, I will say that the stories look great today, and especially story number 3 that turns out potato is the answer to really a lot of problems, as my mother always insinuated. But yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with story number 1 and kind of go from there. And once again, if you want to find out more, head on over to Computer America, and of course we'll have a link over to Ralph's site where Ralph keeps a good catalog of everything that he does with us. And so if you want a more Ralph-centric kind of point of view, check out his site there and do that there. Now, with that being said, Ralph, why don't we go ahead and get started with story number 1?
Yes, the headline here is surprising alternative to crude oil used to make a new recyclable plastic. This story has many layers of coolness to it. I got this from sciencealert.com, great website. Again, we have the link in there for you if you want to learn more. So it's estimated that less than 10% of the estimated 6 billion metric tons of plastic humans have made to date has been recycled. So less than 10% of that massive number has been recycled. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we all in the tech community have a goal of let's accelerate recycling. Let's get clever. Let's find out how we can make this happen better. And that's the underpinning motivation here. So to help increase recycling, 2 materials scientists from Boise State University in the state of Idaho, if you're not familiar, recently developed a new kind of recyclable plastic that, unlike existing plastics, isn't made from crude oil and or its derivatives. And in truth in lending, segue here for a moment, there have been many, many attempts and successful efforts to find alternatives to oil for plastic. So we're not saying this is the first time ever on Earth this has been done, but this is kind of a fun little spin on it. You'll see in just a second. So the new type of plastic is based on a surprising ingredient used to make something you probably have at home, and that's super glue. Okay. In specific, the new plastic is based on, and I'm going to try to say this is a mouthful, based on polyethyl cyanoacrylate.
Sounds right to me.
PECA. An acronym is PECA. Mm-hmm. Hey, I got through the word and I couldn't do the acronym. How about that? Which is prepared from a monomer, that's MONOMER, used to make superglue. But wait a minute, time out. What's a monomer? A monomer is a molecule that can be bonded to other identical molecules to form a polymer. So we've all heard the word polymer probably all our lives. Well, it comes from combining multiple monomers, hence polymer, right?
Makes sense.
So what the researchers at Boise State University said, if this technology they've come up with, if it were manufactured at industrial scales, upscaled to an industrial level, the researchers suggest their new recyclable plastic could replace polystyrene plastics that are not accepted by most curbside recycling programs. This is where their potential contribution is so important for recycling. And a little bit about polystyrene plastics, which come in a couple of forms. Expanded polystyrene, also known as good old styrofoam, which is used, of course, we all know, for lightweight packaging material to make takeaway food containers and so on and so forth. Thank God, though, I'm seeing less and less and less of styrofoam. Yeah. I think you and I have talked about this, Ben. Some of the stuff I'm getting now from Amazon and whatever, very rarely see styrofoam now, thank goodness. And the other kind of polystyrene plastic that you see a lot is thermally molded polystyrene, which is used to make disposable plates, cups, and cutlery. So when you go to the takeout food place and they give you a little plastic fork, that's what we're talking about here for that. So polystyrene plastics may only account for 6% of today's plastic waste, but the Boise State University team believes with further research, their new formula using that molecule from superglue could be used to make other forms of plastic in the future. So you could have this recyclable material and so on and so forth using this accessible molecule that's used to make superglue, and away we go. So just one more incremental step in helping to win the war of plastic recycling.
Yeah. And the article goes into a lot more. You really hit a lot of the key points. They in the article, they mentioned a case study with Norway and how they're able to, really reduce plastic bottles use, or I should say increase recycling of the plastic bottles in Norway by like 97%. I know that places like Japan's always the go-to because they recycle literally 99.9% of their trash. Ralph, like obviously it's this scheme of getting people to be more conscious and recycling and doing their at least putting their refuse in proper bins and getting it out of there. But Ralph, I like it when the problem starts higher up the chain. Or not the solution starts, not the problem. The solution starts higher up the chain, and it's by the time the consumer gets it, it's not really a problem. Depending on what they do with it. Trying to get 5, 7, 8 billion people to do the right thing is much harder than getting a few companies to do the right thing. So solutions like this, new plastic and PECA plastic, I guess PECA plastic. This one sounds amazing. It's really hits a lot of the kind of uses for plastic, but not the damage of plastic. So I like it a lot.
Ben, I love the point you just made, and I want to amplify it. Basically, to distill what you said, it's the solution to this game of recycling ultimately has to do with make stuff that's eminently recyclable. don't put your hopes in on average Joe and Sally walking down the street doing the right thing. We're doing it a lot, and good. That's great. But if you can get smart and figure it out from the get-go in the manufacturing of these containers and other things of this nature, you're right. That's ultimately the answer. And of course, in the end of the day, it's a combination of both that and the end user as well. But this is a good kind of symbolic example of moving forward.
Yes. Now, of course, the hard part is getting it done at industrial scale. But hey, if it's as good, as cheap, as functional, there's really no reason not to. So we'll go from there. So story number 1, story number 2. Let's go ahead and talk about this one. And, just last week we were talking about artificial intelligence, and I guess this is like the opposite. This is like real intelligence in machines.
Yes, this is remarkable. And friends, I'm going to give you the truth in lending statement. I'm not making this up. This is real. This story comes from the United Kingdom's Daily Mail newspaper. Headline: amazing proof of concept demonstration shows a soldier controlling a robot surveillance dog with his thoughts. Where's the Twilight Zone theme music, right?
I'm glad that, I got the best I have is X-Files.
Yeah, something spooky and weird.
Yeah, that's the best I have. But I will say, Ralph, that I'm glad that you kind of edited this, although maybe Daily Mail did after you kind of did the story, because they included things like killer robot dog, which, that's very sensational. But I'm glad that you changed it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in fact, Ben, that raises a good point for everybody. Truth in lending here. Again, I kind of look for these articles. I do take the liberty of modifying the headlines to make them, in my opinion, more user-friendly and appropriate, because this technology we're about to talk to could certainly have applications outside of military. And what the military is doing with this robotic quadruped dog robot, at least at this point, is for surveillance, not for killing people.
Right. They don't have a gun on it. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Well, it doesn't mean they couldn't, but anyway, I digress. So let's get into the story here. There's a great video, by the way. So imagine a patrol of soldiers moving down a roadway, classic bit. And I got a little Army history for you here. Have you ever heard people say, make sure you got my 6 or have my 6? When you go on a patrol, when I was in the Army, so the way it worked was, this goes back to the early 1970s. I'm a very old guy, okay? But when I was in the Army and you would do practice patrols, I was in the National Guard. I wasn't in combat, but when we practiced this stuff.
Same thing.
The radio man was in the middle, okay? Imagine that road in the middle. And then you would have 4 people, 12, 3, at 6 o'clock, so they, like the clock, right?
Right.
And so the guy in the back was the 6 o'clock man. He was covering your back, the 6, cover my 6 on the clock, and you'd walk backwards and you'd rotate because it was very uncomfortable to walk backwards. But your job to be the guy at the 6 was to guard.
Did not know
anyway, that. That's an old fart segue here. Let's get back to the story. Okay, so imagine a patrol of soldiers moving down a roadway or searching a building, aided by a surveillance robot dog. And the dog here looks so much like the Boston Dynamics dog that we all know so well in robotics. Yep. Now, picture one of the soldiers commanding and guiding the robot dog with his or her thoughts. What? It's not a scene from a sci-fi movie. Instead, it's what happened recently in a proof of concept demonstration. So this is still in development to some extent, but the Australian Army claims they perfected commanding the movements of a sophisticated quadruped robot dog, if you will, designed for combat missions using the brain waves of a soldier trained to be its operator. So you can't just put on this gear and make the robot. It's got to be kind of a symbiotic relationship between the user, as it were, in the robot. But the remarkable mind controlling capabilities are achieved by using 8 brain wave sensors in the operator's helmet that work in tandem with a Microsoft HoloLens, which of course is an augmented and mixed reality headset. I think everybody's familiar with the HoloLens. And I thought it might be useful, just a quick tutorial for some people in the audience who might go, augmented and mixed reality. Real quick here, a tutorial. Augmented reality, sometimes just abbreviated to AR, it gives you a view of the real world, the physical world, with an overlay of digital elements. And then mixed reality, MR, a view of the real world, physical world, with an overlay of digital elements where physical and digital elements can interact. So if you're curious about mixed versus augmented, there's your little definition for you. Going back to the story, the mind control system features an artificial intelligence decoder that translates a soldier's brainwave signals into instructions that are wirelessly sent to the dog-like robot. And the motivation here, the idea is you're on patrol, you need to be focused on what's going on around you and so on. So they're content, the Australian Army folks contend this frees the soldiers to stay focused on their surroundings while they deploy the surveillance dog to maybe check out a building or to check out the side of the road or whatever the case may be. And you think about implemented explosive device, IEDs. Wow, better to blow up the dog than the people, right? I mean, anyway, there's all kinds of possibilities.
And I could totally see that being, kind of taken out of context. Better to blow up the robot than the soldiers. So no dogs were hurt in this.
Did I say it wrong?
Yeah. Well, he said the dog, and luckily no dogs are.
So the robot dog, guys, not a real dog. No.
Well, yeah. So. There's that, and it's like, I was thinking your example of covering my six, and the way that soldiers go in formation. It seems pretty foolproof. I'm sure that they still do it today. I could imagine that the person, I guess they call it on point, the person at like the 12 o'clock position as opposed to the 6. Right. That person might be the most vulnerable, because they're moving towards a direction that might have enemies or whatever. Ralph, I could imagine that a robot, this robot dog could maybe take that point. So the most vulnerable person would instead be a robot, and you could have less casualties. So maybe protecting people like that and still keeping their formation, still keeping their their training, but being able to put a robot in harm's way instead of a person. So very cool.
Let's kind of fantasize a little bit more. If this robot had some kind of technology that could sense the presence of implanted bombs in the roadway and that sort of thing, could ferret this stuff and could warn the troops and stop, and they could take action to either avoid the device or to deactivate it or whatever the case may be. So a lot of cool possibilities. So going on here, though, a demonstration video from the Australian Army shows military personnel conducting a simulated patrol using the robot dog, which was instructed to inspect a facility guided only by what it detected from the operator's brainwaves. And get this, the robot dog responded to commands with 94% accuracy. So, for example, the operator soldier says, go right and go left, go forward, stop. 94% accuracy, which I think is just stunning. And again, I want to stress, the headline in the original article was kind of draconian. Yeah. Think about search and rescue. Think about all the kinds of things that are not military, inspecting things that are dangerous for humans to go in and to check out, all these things. There's so many wonderful possibilities that this technology could be applied to, as well as military. So loved this story on many levels.
you take it, and just like you said, search and rescue, you could even take it, let's say, firefighters. These things are notoriously pretty fast and faster than people running. Give a firefighter this when they're doing, battling those forest fires, and hey, you can keep an eye on the front line of the fire as they fight it. There are lots of good applications that aren't just about killing people. So tons and tons, very cool. And Ralph, like so the questions that come to me before we move on to story number 3, primarily is like, it's trained on people's brainwaves, which we've think of like in the medical community. You train a person with, let's say, who's disabled in some way. They have the sensors on their head, and they're training speech things like that. That training doesn't happen overnight. That training takes a couple days, hours, weeks, whatever it may be, for the person to really, at least for the doctors, Ralph, to map and say that this brainwave, the way that this activated, means left, means A, means, whatever it means. I'm wondering, Ralph, how long it takes for a soldier to pair itself, quote unquote, pair itself with the robot dog to be able to read brainwaves, because I can't imagine it's just anyone can slap on the helmet and it immediately starts taking orders. I'm wondering what the training process or how long that would take.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also another kind of practical, I guess I could say, comment, and just sort of occurred to me is you could certainly use voice commands. The commanding soldier, the operating soldier could have a simple little microphone, could even whisper. I mean, if you're worried about speaking out loud and compromising your military situation, why not just go with verbal commands instead of this very sophisticated brainwave stuff? They must have felt there was enough motivation to warrant doing this. And you make a good point. I would have to imagine it would take quite a while to train the artificial intelligence system through machine learning to know that when I think it gets that wave pattern
for that soldier to be paired with that piece of equipment.
That's a good point.
And the only thing I can think of, maybe the talking thing, is like just comms and communication for people. Like when you're there, you don't want to clutter up the communication with robot dog go left, robot dog go here. So I don't know. There's a lot of question marks, but it is an example, and it was working. Again, we showed the video. If you're watching the stream, if you're simply listening, check out the video in the show notes.
Yeah,
but
it's fun.
Ralph, it works. The practicality shrugs, but it does work, and that's pretty cool.
Yes, it is.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so story number 3, as we were talking about before, potatoes. They're probably nature's best friend here, at least for humans. But on Mars, who knows? This one's very cool. So let's talk about story number 3.
This is a fun story, and I'll tease this headline before I give it by saying, when I was in college, one of the things I lived on, along with top ramen and hot dogs and dehydrated mashed potatoes, right? The box of spuds you can.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna never see those products in the same light again. So here's the headline: scientists say habitats on Mars could be made from potato-based building materials. Okay, this comes from Popular Science. It's really it's a fun story, but it's real. Okay. So when humans arrive on Mars, building shelters, of course, will obviously be a top priority for long-term occupation. That has to be solved. There's been a lot of ideas and a lot of suggestions on how this could be accomplished. And the same goes for the moon too, by the way. But transporting traditional building materials from the Earth to Mars would be costly and, of course, impractical. So to provide a doable building material solution, one of many possibilities, researchers from the University of Manchester in England have developed a new, super strong building material primarily composed of just potato starch, a bit of salt, and simulated Martian regolith, or dirt. And the researchers called their concoction Starcrete.
I think my mother's been making that for dinner every night for the past 10 years. That's you could probably build buildings with that stuff. She's not listening right now, so I'm safe, everyone. But I'm not here next week. You know what happened. Okay, please continue.
And the University of Manchester team contends that potato starches are likely to be transported to Mars as a food source for the astronauts. Certainly, I would think initially until the astronauts can figure out how to do agriculture and control environments on the surface of Mars, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so with this in mind, according to the team's estimates, a 55-pound sack of dehydrated potatoes includes enough starch for a 0.5 metric ton of Starcrete, enough to make around 213 bricks for structures. And when they say bricks, I'm guessing they mean the kind of standard bricks that we think of for our buildings and what have you. And in experiments, combining the potato starch with salt and magnesium chloride taken from the simulated Martian soil. So again, they would extract from the Martian soil magnesium chloride, put that together with salt and potato starch. They discovered that their Starcrete formula offered twice the compressive strength of traditional concrete. What? Twice the compressive strength? That blew my mind. And another thing is kind of a fun little trivia thing. Their Starcrete starcrete can even be baked at normal microwave or home oven temperature, so you don't require some super high temperature process to bake or finalize.
So somewhere
these,
300 to 500
bricks.
degrees, something like that.
So it's doable. They feel it's practical, doable, possible. Is this the answer for building on Mars? Maybe yes, maybe no. Is it part of a package of combination or a combination of solutions? I think that's more likely to be the case. But it is a fun thing, and I love the bit about potatoes. Never going to look at hash browns or powdered potatoes again ever the same way.
Well, yeah, and really, 55 pounds of potatoes and extracting the starch from that, mixing it with the regolith and doing all that kind of thing makes. And I don't know why salt was also an added ingredient. Maybe salt extracts the starch out of the potato or something like that, or maybe it just the building tastes better in emergency situations.
It tastes better.
Yeah, I don't know why they include the salt, but Ralph, I'm guessing the blocks, for those who are watching the video portion, a gentleman is holding some of the blocks in his hands. It looks like 3 blocks stacked on top of each other. And the blocks, because they said that makes bricks. It says it makes 213 bricks. I think those are the bricks. So those are 3 bricks, and it makes about, I would say, looks like about a 4-inch by 4-inch cube.
That's
kind of
probably like half of a normal brick from what we would think of, I guess. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that picture up because it kind of puts it into reality perspective. So again, that kind of feeds back to my comment a moment ago. Is it the final solution for building? No, but could it be part of? Yeah, maybe.
Right, and it seems like these tiny little bricks. So of course they can make them bigger. But Ralph, I guess when you're on Mars and there's not a Home Depot, there's not a Walmart, there's not a Lowe's. Hey, you take every building material that you can get.
That's
right. I would guess that, just like NASA, they don't waste anything when they're up there in space or out there. And hey, if they're eating potatoes anyways, and you can pull the starch out, hey, why not turn it into something useful, some kind of shelter? So very, very clever.
Ben, if nothing else, that story fits the quirky and weird.
It absolutely does, and I especially like the tie into the moon as well, because Ralph, as you know, this week very famously we got to see the first 4 astronauts in a long time that are going to be returning to the moon on the Artemis 1, was it, or Artemis 2? I think it was the Artemis 1.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just was so enamored just looking at it and learning about the people and all that good stuff. Yeah,
all of them very accomplished scientists and astronauts in their own right. So very, very cool to see that. And then, of course, it also set up, just to give everyone a little bit extra excitement this week, it also sets up Artemis 2, which is underway, which is going to be landing on the moon. So that's all of it super exciting. NASA never disappoints. So story number well, unless they cut projects, but it is what it is. Story number 3. Story number 4. Let's go ahead and wrap this week up with an app for smartphones. And, cancer comes up every so often here on the show because they're getting better at treating it. And it's always good to hear. So story number 4.
Yeah, in fact, Ben, is a kind of a pattern, not always the case, but a lot of times I end our segment with something uplifting where science and technology is advancing medicine and helping for cure people and so forth. But this headline here is new app uses smartphone selfies to screen for pancreatic cancer. And when I first saw this theme or idea, I thought, okay, how in the heck
how do you get the selfie of the pancreas, right?
Yeah, how does that's sure that was my gut, no pun intended, initial reaction. This comes from the University of Washington. That's our second Northwest theme for today. University of Washington press release. So this is really interesting stuff, at least it is to me. Pancreatic cancer has one of the worst track records with a 5-year survival rate of only 9%. So ouch. We all know, I think it's not a good thing. And deadly pancreatic cancer is hard to predict, in part because there are no telltale symptoms or non-invasive screening tools to catch a tumor before it spreads. So, it's a real problem. But there is actually an early symptom, and that's jaundice. and you may have heard about jaundice. It's a yellow discoloration of the skin and eyes caused by a buildup of something called bilirubin in the blood. And bilirubin is an orange-yellow pigment formed in the liver. Now, University of Washington researchers recently announced a smartphone app to detect bilirubin called BiliScreen, okay? And the BiliScreen app uses a smartphone's camera, computer vision algorithms, and artificial intelligence-based machine learning tools to analyze a close-up selfie to detect increased bilirubin levels in the white part of an eye. Okay. So one of the things about jaundice is the yellowing of the eyes. But by the time your eyes are noticeably yellow, you're kind of in trouble. You're going to find out what's so cool about this. The goal of the new BiliScreen app is to detect signs of jaundice when bilirubin levels are slightly elevated. Here's the key: before they're even visible to the naked eye, giving doctors an entirely new proactive screening tool for individuals deemed to be at risk for pancreatic cancer. Ding, that's the payoff. In a clinical study, the researchers asked 70 people to use their smartphones and the BiliScreen app and a 3D printed box to hold the phone in the correct position to take a close-up selfie of each eye, and in specific to ensure the camera is in the correct position to control the eye's exposure to light. So 70 people with the BiliScreen app, this 3D printed box to hold the smartphone's camera in the right position. And the results were very impressive, Ben, with the BiliScreen app correctly identifying cases of concern with 89.7% of the time. So they were able to identify these potentially problematic people. Mm-hmm. And this was all done to compare with the current blood test used for this purpose. So how clever is that? I mean, I love it. And again, to detect the appearance of jaundice in the eye before it's even apparent to the human eye, before a doctor could even see it with their own eyes. Now they can have this advanced opportunity to catch this and then to take proactive treatment steps as appropriate.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the glasses make all the difference as well to, kind of give an accurate color scale to compare people's eyes. So if you're watching the video portion, you can see them there. They're definitely a fashion statement, but they're also, I guess, a medical device as well. This was a very, very cool. And by the way, because I guess like in a roundabout way, very not cathartic, but if for anyone who remembers, obviously Steve Jobs, Apple came out with the iPhone, kind of revolutionized smartphones as we know it. And Ralph, I mean, if you recall, he died of pancreatic cancer. That's what Steve Jobs died from. So it's kind of fitting that, just by using a simple smartphone that everyone has in their pocket nowadays, you can, of course, potentially catch and treat the disease that, unfortunately took Steve Jobs, took him out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Wow, that's a good trivia point. I had forgotten that. That's interesting.
Yeah, nice little wraparound. But again, this is here to help a lot of people, and the BiliScreen definitely seems like a very, very cool product. And again, very a lot easier than going into your body and snapping a selfie. So just another tool that even doctors could probably pull people in and use. So Ralph, thank you so much for joining us here today. Everyone out there, thank you for joining us. If you want to find out more, Ralph Bond's website, you of course get our segments as well as his segments over on the Mark Mason Show. Ladies and gentlemen, until next week, have a great weekend. Do something fun. We'll catch you here next time. Bye-bye, everyone.